closed in a ceremony that we call the Teypohsweepeehl, the reverent binding of the holy scalp lock braid, keeping this braid from 1 year of age until his death, reverent and sanctified from all other hair on his head, and considered this genethlic braid as the core of a traditional male's spirituality, spiritual existence, ceremonial life, and a male's umbilical cord to the divine. And from this day on, our people's prayers were always given facing east towards the morning star, Venus. The doors of our Ewachali or skin houses, or Tlalchali or earth houses, or the Hoyahuauchali long houses, always faced east towards Venus, for the day when our matrilineal matriarch At'tonaltiuhtlacameh's people from the sky, the people from Tlahuizcalpan, return. And all of our ceremonies always begin in the eastern direction and end in the eastern direction, moving counterclockwise. And as well, from this point on, the race of the second age carried and adorned themselves in all of their vestments, including their skin, with the tlahuistli, the sigil of our patriarch given to him by At'tonaltiuhtlacameh, the four-pointed cross of Venus, the Nahuitzintli or Nauchampa, and its counterclockwise whirling counterpart, the Nauololin, and because of this became known as the Nahuake, the Nahuatlacameh, the Nahuaja, or Nahua, meaning the keepers, or those associated with the four-pointed cross and the sacred number 4. This is also where the root of both the etymology and the stories of the Nahuali sorcerers, Nahua or Naga serpent race of sorcerers in Aztec, Toltec, Mexica, Maya, Inca, Muskogean, Iroquoian, Algonquin, Hopi, Hawaiian, Maori, and Polynesian, Olmeca, Aryan, Vedic, Dravidian, Celtic, Southeast Asian, Egyptian, Kemetic, and African oral history and perceived mythology come from. Now it is said when Sipach Tonaltzin died that his soul became the divine archetype known as Shipe Totechsin, the flayed one, or he whom sheds his skin, the divine archetype of rebirth and renewal that replaced one of the 4 divine archetypes, Ehechatsin, the reverent wind, the divine archetype of the unseen force of change, and became one of the primary 4 cardinal archetypes of Ometeyotzin that dwell in the second to highest 12th realm of the heavens of Topan that we call El Huichatl de Teyohan. The Piochtli or Temilot genethlic braid worn with a fully shorn head was continued by the second age clan's descendants whom had become the royal priest caste of ancient Aztlan, and was continued by the clans of their descendants, while the second age clans whom had become the military nobility of Aztlan, such as the Coachique, wore the shorn head with the Piochtli as well, but more commonly with a strip of hair that began at the top of their scalp locks and ended halfway to 3/4 towards the front of the top of their heads and was spiked upwards with red Tlalpatzintli grease paint. This crest was called the Huachichichtli and was mimicking the red tall comb of the Huanajatl rooster, the red jungle fowl of ancient Aztlan, not the crest of the Huauchenche woodpecker or the crest of the Xiltototl red cardinal, whom are not known for their warrior culture and lifestyle and incredible, fearless, and ferocious fighting capabilities, unlike the male Huanajatl or the red jungle fowl rooster, who very much so is. Now, the clans of heavily mixed second and third age raised peoples still kept the burden, the tradition, and rites of the Piochtli genethlic braid, but instead of continuing to pluck out all of the hair on their heads besides the Piochtli after the age of 1, instead adopted the Huananahatzontli, also known as the Huatepoltzontli, which was a mushroom or penis head-shaped haircut, which was kept short so it could be easily distinguishable from the hair of the Piochtli or scalp lock braid that had been preserved from a male scalp lock binding ceremony which occurred 1 solar year after his birth. Another variant worn by this same diaspora was the Ometzonilpili, which was the Piochli braid preserved from the age of 1 year old, and then the rest of the hair grown back, remaining uncut, but kept separate from the Piochli in 2 long braids made from the hair split down the center of the top and back of the head below the Piochli. Another variant of the Ometzonilpili was a large Piochli or scalp lock that was made up of all of the hair of the back of the head, braided into a single large Piochli braid similar to the Chinese Bianzi, and the leftover hair on the temples and top of the head were then split down the center and braided into 2 smaller braids. Now, in this third age and new lands that this race of the second age found themselves on, when they left Chicomostoch, the inner earth, and migrated out onto the surface world into Aztlan with their bodies painted in the red Tlapazintli ochre paint, they found that a new race of early biped humanoid was already present on these islands, whose genesis into bipedal Homo sapien had occurred on these islands of Aztlan. This was the reverent race of the third age, the At'tonaltiuhtlacameh, the race of the water sun. The Aboriginal people of Aztlan or Atlantis, also known as the Osumatlacameh, the monkey people, because they were said to have evolved into bipedal Homo sapien from the Osumatzintli, the reverent monkeys whom had survived on these string of islands through the global cataclysm that had ended the second age by way of a great solar wind and shifting of lands, whom had then slowly evolved into the bipedal humanoid of Aztlan or Atlantis in the third age, creating the first race of iron-blooded, primate evolved human beings whom we knew as the At'tonaltiuhtlacameh, the race of the water sun, the race of the third age whom our second age clans often referred to as the Kwa'itliltsincha, the reverent black-headed or black-haired people, who modern Western academics refer to as the Neanderthal. And because this race's genesis had occurred on the surface of the earth during this third age, under this new third age's sun, the At'tonaltiuhtlacameh, the race of the third age, the Aboriginal population of Aztlan, had to develop a certain and specific physiological adaptation unique to that location and age's solar and atmospheric conditions, which created and produced, among other specific physiological phenotypical traits, the melanin, known today as brown eumelanin, which creates dark black hair, brown skin, and honey brown to dark brown eyes, and phenotypical features specific to and seen exemplified by the Asiatic Rh-negative haplogroup R diaspora and phenotype, still present most largely among populations in modern-day South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, India, North America, Central and South America, Mexico, China, Japan, the Middle East, Arabia, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, Micronesia, Polynesia, Alaska, and Siberia. It is well said that there were many diasporas within this third age's race, Rh-positive haplogroup R, who between the time at the end of the third age and the beginning of the fourth age, whose skin turned black as their hair, along with many animals, including the group of early hominid, whom would later become the black-skinned phenotype and counterpart to the white-skinned phenotype and diaspora of the race of the fourth age of Cro-Magnon. It is well said that not only did the skin of these diasporas of the race of the third age turn black, having to epigenetically mutate to produce a more strong type of melanin, scholars refer to as black eumelanin, to block, bind with, and filter out the overwhelming harmful amount of UV radiation coming from the sun during this pan-generational solar event that occurred through the end of the third age and into the beginning of the fourth age, close to 55,000 years ago on the surface of the earth, affecting most extremely certain latitudes, locations, and ley lines. It is said as well that their hair turned thicker, fuller, and spiraled into varying degrees of kinky or woolly to help generate a more powerful native electromagnetic field to help protect this diaspora from the solar radiation. This diaspora's nostrils is well widened to a degree to adapt to the low amount of oxygen in these certain locations, latitudes, and ley lines on the surface of the earth where this solar event impacted most extremely, where there was a depleted atmosphere and thus much less oxygen available. Examples of descendants of this very special and sacred specific third age races, black-skinned, kinky-haired, and wide-nostril diaspora or phenotype still live on as the Haplogroup R populations, most commonly found in Australasia, Papua New Guinea, southern India, Melanesia, Malaysia, Polynesia, Australia, the Middle East, New Caledonia, but as well, according to various people's oral history, small diasporas of this phenotype and haplogroup were said to be present as well in Japan and parts of North, Central, and South America, and even in the British Isles. In fact, it is said that the tall, fair-skinned, copper-haired diaspora, the half-giant, half-second-age Atlantean race of refugees of the Olmeca Empire, when they arrived on some of the southwestern or Australasian islands of the Pacific, like that of New Zealand, there was already a small population present who were described as small, round-faced, black-skinned, and kinky-haired people who are said to be the remnants of this very diaspora of the third age race of the Apache-Navajo, whose skin had gone from brown to black, just like the black crow, the black raven, the black jaguar, the black serpents, the black bears, the black primates, the black wolves, the black foxes, and all other animals and people that had to develop this biochemical compound and variant of melanin known as black eumelanin because they had remained unsheltered on the surface of the earth during the time between the end of the third age and the beginning of the fourth age, when there was a solar event that triggered this very specific epigenetic mutation. It is said that on some of the islands where the clans of the copper-blooded, half-breed giant and second-age blooded mid landed, they fell in love with some of the black-skinned, round-faced third-age women whom lived there and chose to either stay and live with their people, or some of the women chose to leave with them as their wives, and these two groups' blood became mixed. This is the reason why on some of the Australasian islands you see indigenous third-age peoples from Haplogroup R with black eumelanin saturated skin, and yet with copper or gold hair and blue, hazel, or green eyes and Denisovan blood. And why on most of the Polynesian islands you see Polynesians with Australasian features, kinky hair and wide noses and very dark skin. It is said a similar occurrence as this happened on the islands of Japan, when another large group of half-giant, half-second-age diaspora fled the Proto-Aryan, Proto-Sumerian, Proto-Semitic empires of the Levant, the bloodlines whom are brought on the arks of the Atlantean king Nota or Sehuitzin, whom after so many generations during the period of the Fourth Age had chose to flee the empires and migrated east from the Levant into Central Asia, intermingling with the race of the Fourth Age present in that territory, creating the Proto-Mongolian or Central Asian diaspora. And another group who did not settle in the area continued migrating through Central Asia and Mongolia into the Pacific coast of northern China, and then to the southern Pacific coast of modern-day Russia, where one group then migrated north, settling in Siberia, and another group migrated south into the Strait of Tartary by canoe. Then from there, migrated south into the La Perouse Strait, into modern-day Hokkaido, Japan, where this diaspora split again. One group was said to have then traveled from Hokkaido through the Kuril Islands by canoe into the Kamchatka Peninsula, where one large group traveled north, settling into Siberia, while another group left from the east coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula and island hopped through the string of the Aleutian Islands, island by canoe, east into the Alaskan Peninsula, where this group then migrated further inland and settled in the lands between the Arctic and Pacific Ocean in modern-day inland Alaska and western Canada, where they intermingled with the local Fourth Age indigenous populations of the area and became the Athabascan language.